Welcome back. The time is 9:40, almost 19 minutes before the top of the hour. And joining us right now is Professor and Co-Director for the Center of Sustainability and Transitions at Stellenbosch University, Professor Mark Swilling. Mark, thank you so much for joining us on Salam Media. We read yesterday that Stellenbosch University Senate voted against the motion condemning genocide in Gaza. If you can just briefly, interpret that decision for us by the university, and also give us insight on the decision to table that vote and where it came from.
Well, basically, the motion, which calls for a ceasefire and an end to the genocide, was put together by a group of progressive Stellenbosch University professors, and it was published in the Daily Maverick a little while ago. And that motion was put to the Senate. So a meeting of the Senate, which is the body that brings together the professors of the university, had a special meeting specifically to vote on that motion. And so, as one can expect, there was a lot of debate and discussion, and the motion was put to the Senate, and about 80 voted in favor, and over 100 voted against. So that's essentially what happened. And as I said, the motion really called on the Senate to condemn genocide in Gaza and to call for a ceasefire and the release of all hostages, and in line with international calls. And the Senate has previously taken a position against apartheid, and if they were able to take a position against apartheid in South Africa, they should be able to take a position against apartheid and genocide in Gaza and the wider Palestine-Israel context.
The debate around the motion included concerns about Jewish representation during Passover. What are your thoughts on the argument that decisions could be postponed if certain groups are absent?
I don't think it's a valid argument. It's a bit like saying, sorry, we can't discuss apartheid until white people are in the room. It just makes if somebody said that to you, you would just like shake your head in disbelief and say, where does that ridiculous notion come from? Anyone can discuss apartheid in South Africa. And the same applies, just because the Zionist Israeli state, which regards Israel as an exclusive homeland for the Jewish people, just because they speak in the name of the Jewish people doesn't mean that they represent all Jews or represent the interests of Jews. In fact, quite the opposite. Everything that the Israeli Zionist state is doing is to make Jews in Israel and in the rest of the world even more insecure than they were before, because these are extreme, morally repugnant, internationally illegal actions. Genocide is illegal, and if you do it in the name of all Jewish people, then you're insulting all Jewish people, because there's Jews all over the world who are protesting against genocide and calling for the implementation of international law.
Where do you think this vote positions the University of Stellenbosch when it comes to the approach on injustices and humanitarian crises around the world? Where does this position the university? I'm sure it's a university that prides itself in being very forward thinking and very liberal, but this decision seems to be, saying otherwise.
Well, you must bear in mind that it wasn't a landslide vote against the motion. It was nearly 50-50. And that also says a lot. It needs to be recognized that there were 80 professors who wanted to vote in favor of the motion. In terms of positioning, there was an argument that was made that this is a war and the university should not take sides. And there are other wars going on around the world. So does that mean we must take sides in all those other wars? Well, the premise of the argument is problematic. This isn't a war. This is genocide. This is one of the most sophisticated military machines, one of the most experienced and deadly military machines in the world, attacking and bombing and flattening a largely defenseless population who don't even have their own airport, don't have their own air force, don't have a gigantic supply of ammunitions from foreign countries equal to what the Israelis have. So this is correctly defined as genocide, and the way in which Palestinians have been treated since 1948 can be described and is described all over the world as a form of apartheid, a term that was invented by South Africa. So the university and the Senate has correctly now taken a position against the history of what apartheid and what apartheid did in South Africa, and therefore it follows that taking a position on Gaza is not about taking sides in a war. It's taking a position against genocide, which is ethically the most horrifying thing one can imagine. But as importantly, it's internationally illegal. And so the university should be positioning itself on the side of international law and ethical responsibility. It's not about taking sides in a war, because it can't be defined as a war. It can only really be defined as genocide.
Why would it have been so important for yourself and the other progressive professors who were part of tabling this motion for your institution, essentially, institution that you work for, to recognize that what's currently happening in Gaza is a genocide, and the state of Israel is an occupying force, and there's essentially an apartheid going on in that part of the world?
Well, I mean, Stellenbosch has a history which is well known. It played a central part in the building of apartheid and white power, and therefore has a responsibility possibly even greater than any other South African university to take positions on matters such as this. So for me personally, I was born and brought up as a Jew. Both my parents were Jewish. I don't and have never identified with the Israeli state as my homeland. It just has never made any sense. I've fought against apartheid for a unitary, non-racial democracy, which is what we have. We don't have a two-state solution in South Africa, one for whites, one for blacks. We have a single-state solution, and I still think that is what should have been implemented in 1948 and still should be considered, although I might have to agree with the pragmatists who call for a two-state solution. It doesn't fit with who I am as a white Jewish South African who completely identifies with what we are building in South Africa and who completely identifies with the struggle of the Palestinian people. So I felt it was important to put my name. I wasn't part of the activist leadership that built the campaign or wrote the motion, but I supported it.
I think it's always interesting to hear the response of Jewish people to the argument that, criticizing Israel's actions is tantamount to anti-Semitism. And, how can you, respond to such a criticism, making those parallels about criticizing the state of Israel and, it being anti-Semitism?
Well, it's a fundamentally problematic assumption. Jews did very well living with Muslims in many different countries in North Africa and Eastern Europe. The Albanians, for example, protected the Jews from the Nazi persecution in the middle of last century. Muslim Albanians, Jews did very well in Iraq before Zionism, and after the Second World War, the real anti-Semites were the Western powers who didn't know what to do with the Jews. They needed to dump them somewhere. They didn't want to absorb them en masse into the US or into the UK or into France or anywhere else. And they needed a solution, a homeland, a bit like how white South African, the apartheid state, thought of Africans as tribes who must have their own homelands. And so the British colonial power agreed to kind of give Palestine to the Jews. And instead of the Jews realizing that after thousands of years of persecution because of their race, that the best thing they could do is to be non-racial and incorporate the Palestinians who were living on the land into a single state solution and built a non-racial democracy like we did in the 90s. So that would have been the right thing, and that would have resulted in the Arab world and the rest of the world fully embracing the Jews who were wanting to live in the Middle East and build a non-racial democracy. But that's not what happened. And because of a racist attitude towards Palestinians, we have the situation that we have today. And if you then go up against the Zionist Israeli state, that is not out of anti-Semitism. That is out of a commitment to the interests of Jews and Palestinians together. That's not anti-Semitic. In some ways, what is anti-Semitic is to do things that is not in the interests of Jews. And that's exactly what the Israeli state is doing.
Mm-hmm. And just lastly, before I let you go, are there going to be, other efforts, to push and, have the institution, Stellenbosch University, recognize that there's a genocide going on, or you're going to take the vote as it is and, essentially move on?
Well, I mean, the students have taken their own actions, and the group of progressive professors, the 80 or so plus, professors are not going to just fold their arms and do nothing. So there is discussion of further action. So yes, I think as a group of progressive professors from all backgrounds, all religious beliefs, it's our duty to make sure that we talk truth to power wherever we are in our research, out in society, and within our own university. This is not a war where we're asking the university to take sides. This is genocide, and the International Court of Justice condoned the South African government's position that there is a valid case to be made that this is genocide, and that still obviously has to get finally tested in ongoing court proceedings. But the evidence is clear. This is genocide, and we should be taking a position on this matter as a university, I believe.
All right. Thank you so much, Professor Mark Swilling. We're going to leave it there, and we really appreciate you giving us your time here on Salam Media. There you have it, the Stellenbosch University professor and co-director at the Center for Sustainability and Transitions, Professor Swilling, there giving us insight on Stellenbosch University's Senate vote against a motion condemning genocide in Gaza. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be chatting the UEFA Champions League with football journalist Pomo Klani. It's been a very eventful midweek of games, and we'll be wrapping it up and looking forward to the final on the 1st of June, where Real Madrid will be facing off with the dark horses of the tournament, Borussia Dortmund.